It's where it all began, meaning Tagore's Western reputation. I mean, he came here to get to know the Western literary people, and Hampstead at the time, or still, is an area where the artists, painters, musicians, they all lived. It started the Nobel Prize effort from here, and Tagore read some of his translations here, and actually W.B. Yeats read some of these in a kind of musical note, and everybody was overwhelmed by the emotion of the poem. So it all started here. In this house, they decided to offer his poems, the translated poems, to publishers. Although he lived here from, say, end of June in 1912 for 6 weeks, this is the kind of taking off point for Tagore's Western journey, and to be recognized as a writer, Indian writer, to be valued and honored in the West. This is what Yeats wrote in the introduction of the Gitanjali when it first came out. I have carried the manuscript of these translations about with me for days, reading it in railway trains or on the top of omnibuses and in restaurants. And I have often had to close it, lest some stranger would see how much it moved me. These lyrics display in their thought a world I have dreamed of all my life, the work of a supreme culture. It's very moving. He must have been quite bowled over by Tagore's poetry. Tagore's songs means a lot of interesting things for me. It's not the kind of happiness that you get when you eat an ice cream. I would say to you about the beauty of the language, how wonderfully he manipulated words. Like, I can give you an example. There is one song which has got 8 lines, and on those lines there are 4 synonyms of night. Night means darkness, night. But if you translate it, you will think it's a bit boring. Why is this man repeating these 4 words for the same time of the day or night? But when you really realize that using those 4 words, he was actually meaning 4 shades of night. One is the deep, dark midnight, which is completely very deep and contemplative time. One is the morning, when the night is just ending and sun's rising. And then one is just when the evening is finishing and night coming in, time to make love. So all these different meanings, when you understand that, gosh, what a great poet he must have been to blend all these words in 8 lines and created this song, you get a kind of pleasure which I can only say, it might sound very pompous, but it is a kind of aesthetic pleasure, a pleasure that you get standing in front of a painting. You know, all of a sudden you discover something, that this painting talks to you, this music talks to me. So that's the kind of pleasure or happiness I get from his song. And the older I'm growing, I find more meaning. As you know, Tagore's songs are many-layered, how you interpret it, at which stage of life you are. And that is something that one has to discover for oneself.
যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে যদি আলো না ধরে ওরে ওরে ও অভাগা আলো না ধরে যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে তবে বজ্রা নলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জ্বলো রে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জ্বলো রে যদি তোর
He'd suffered a lot of bereavement. There was a period in his life when his father died, his wife died, his children died, right, left and centre. But you know, if I was comparing the period of time and his creativity, he was still writing songs. And they are delightful songs. And I was thinking, how on earth could he write such delightful song in such moments of sorrow? I think these were his consolation. I mean, he must have realized that in order to deal with grief, you need find your creativity, or whichever way you are. You might be a painter, you might be a poet, you might be a songwriter. So that is how he sublimated his personal suffering. Tagore had a very solid core inside him, which is probably wasn't been tarnished by anything. At the core of his heart, he was an artist. He was creating art, and that would give him the joy of living. And that is his philosophy. He would look out of the window and see the open field and feel delighted by it and be inspired by it. These are semi-philosophic, really. It's a kind of realization. He had a deep spiritual core coming from his faith, which is Brahma. And that is kind of permeated through his philosophy, if you call it philosophy, that we are all united in the world. Every being is kind of a chain in the wholeness of the being, and we should take delight in whatever we can find and see it's part of our own being, and don't be upset by the sadness. I remember there was one letter he wrote about when his young son, he died of illness. He was a very creative child, and Tagore, after his funeral, coming back, and he was very sad, and yet he looked out of the window and saw the full moonlight on the field, and he said, "Oh, my son is not here, but nothing is missing in this world. He must be somewhere else. The world is flooded with moonlight. There must be joy somewhere." So he had this mental power of drawing strength from nature and beauty. Suffering is a human condition. It will happen. But your capability as a human being is to rise above suffering, not to give in to suffering and make something of your life. It's not that the kind of people have all kind of therapies these days. They take tablets to get out of this dark place that they go to when they're depressed. Tagore doesn't have any of these things. He thinks that only thing that people can get out of their own suffering is by looking at their own internal resource, inner resource, that, you have to find your point of strength and take it from there. And that's where I think is the most important message, at least for me personally. I lost my husband at a very young age, and my only comfort was, at that time, was Tagore's songs, because I sort of, you might think it's quite odd that I took comfort in music. They were actually very inspiring, because through the music, I realized these are the songs that my husband liked. He was a good singer, and we used to sing those songs together. So it brought the happy memories back. So obviously there was something. And then, because he was a very qualified singer, he could also interpret the song. And I was reminded of all the interpretation he gave me about the songs. And I understood the deeper meanings of the song, not just the superficial meaning.
When Napoleon came to power, he learned that several countries were planning to put a coalition force against him. As he came here, there was this huge battle of Waterloo in one day on the 18th June 1815, and he lost the battle. And on this place where we are, it's actually the place where the Prince of Orange, William II, the son of the King of the Netherlands, William I, was wounded. And his father wanted this monument to be built in memory of that event. And on top of it, there is the lion, which symbolizes courage. Well, it has a lot to do with Tagore because the main purpose of Napoleon was to have peace. He made war in order to get peace. And so the problem of Napoleon was that he didn't want to lose his power. And he lost his power, but with 12,000 people dead and 35,000 wounded. So, well, I think the younger generation should be more aware of history and not repeat history. And that's why I think Tagore's work is so important to remind us what are the important things, and what we should be aware of in life.
Il faut décidément mieux nous faire comprendre. Attrapons-la! Garde-nous la charge sur son épaule et reconduisons-la dans son antre.
Mais qu'est-ce qui pourrait vous si excité aujourd'hui? Avez-vous un travail pressé à faire?
Oui, nous avons un travail urgent, très urgent.
Mais quel est ce travail?
Nous devons préparer une comédie pour notre fête du printemps.
Ah, jouer. Jour et nuit. Jouer.
Voici notre maître. Notre maître.
Voilà. Quel bruit vous faites?
Est-ce notre bruit qui vous a fait sortir de votre antre?
Oui.
Eh bien, nous l'avons justement fait pour cela.
Vous ne voulez pas que je reste chez moi?
Pourquoi demeurer enfermé? Le monde extérieur a été fait avec une profusion de soleil, de lune et d'étoiles. Jouissons-en et justifions ainsi l'audace divine qui a permis une telle prodigalité.
Que voulez-vous dire?
Ceci.
The key message from Tagore is that he wanted to improve the quality of human life in every way, in education, in art, in music, in painting, in social work, in politics, all embracing improvement of quality of life. We have forgotten what self-development means. We have been given all the opportunity to learn, to go to school, to buy a house, to buy designer clothes, everything. And that is the goal of life. It is not self-improvement. Self-improvement is enhancing your creative ability, your free thinking. You have to develop your own sources of knowledge and distribute it for the betterment of the world. Most human beings should try and achieve their hidden possibilities. Some of us do not know what possibilities we've got. And given the right encouragement, it will become something that it could eventually improve the quality of human life. And Tagore did it for Bengal in every way.
Sun in the earth, sunflower, bird in the air, rain, eye within eye, daybreak. I hear those strange whispers again.